Arc 6, The Corridor of Memories. Chapter 25, The Man Who Waits on the Second Floor, Electra. There was a woman, all by herself. Oppressed was the woman, by her family, her clan, by her race who should have loved her. All saw her with disdain, all ostracized her. Prior to being born, expectations were laid upon that woman. Alas, her birth turned her traitor to them. What remained was dejection and disappointment, what bestowed upon her was only scorn and ridicule. Those were the sole possessions of the woman. There existed a dearest wish of her clan. To bring back the symbol of their former glory and prosperity, the second coming of their founder whom they called God. All kinds of secret arts and all types of inhumane atrocities, unfathomable, the number of taboos committed, all of its fruits was the woman. However, the birth of that woman betrayed their dearest wish, and the clan abandoned the woman with disappointment and despair. Clansmen, go somewhere and live and die. For that is your sin. Abandoned by her family, by her race, she was released into the fields as a child. Cast away with no means of survival, the child was not supposed to survive. However, even if she lacked means of survival, she possessed the strength to survive. Ironically enough, it was the feast of what betrayed the dearest wish of the clan, the taboos and offenses they had committed. Unknown to words, lacking all wisdom, merely abiding by her instincts, the woman survived to live a long life in the fields. Killing beasts, sipping on their lifeblood, crawling on the earth, tasting muddy water. Before a long time passed, the child became a young girl, the young girl became a woman, and it became difficult to live in the fields. Hearing the rumors of a woman laying waste to the mountains, as if it were a beast, men aimed for that life, and the woman was captured. The captured woman appeared beautiful, the men abstained from taking away her life, and the woman was proceeded to be kept by them. While becoming a yes man of the men, gradually the woman's consciousness descended onto a human environment from the fields. Losing the indispensability of struggling to survive, exposed to the desires of the men, days of merely living. Eventually the woman, upon the bed, came to acquire things unacquainted from the men. Words, wisdom, way of life, and emotions. Eventually her treatment altered, conferred with things to adorn her body, the woman was treated like a precious jewel. Among those days, the woman embraced queer thoughts for the men. Whether that was something resembling gratitude or obligation, the woman then had no lead to understand that. While embracing those thoughts, the woman snapped the necks of all the men dwelling in the residence. Easily, in one breath, without making them suffer, in an instant, grouping them all together, she consigned them to oblivion. Sneaking away from the residence, proceeding towards the fields, lacking all doubt, the woman returned to her own hometown. The woman attained queer thoughts regarding the race residing there, the clan possessing the same blood as her, the people who had bodies distantly larger than hers. That they were feelings of hatred and desire for revenge, the woman then did not realize. Merely, their weeps and wails, voices begging for forgiveness were quite thrilling. For the first time, the woman smiled from her heart. Woman, fall apart here and die an unsightly death. Because that is your sin, you see. For the sake of attaining that felicity, from one after the other, the woman pulverized the dearest wish of her race, her blood relatives, her clan by herself. Politely and courteously, not leaving a single one, not sparing a single one, taking her time, one by one, with certainty. Before long, when all of her race died out, when anything and everything had come to an end, the woman returned to the residence where she had lived with the men. Though she had abandoned the corpses of her race, she buried all of the corpses of the men courteously. And once merely she alone was left in the residence, the woman took a deep, deep breath. That was relaxation, tranquility, the woman, for the first time, experienced utter bliss. Nobody would interfere with her now. Thinking and taking action, both lay in futility, so she will merely fall asleep. The witch of sloth continued to indulge in everlasting inactivity, untiring peace. The stairway that led to the second floor Electra ought to be called the Great Stairway, because of its grand presence. Compared to the spiral stairway used to get from the 6th floor to the 5th floor and furthermore to the 4th, the Great Stairway was much wider, and much longer. As it took the space of an entire room, the intimidating feel it gave off was a given. What was supposed to be an empty room, was now the Great Stairway. With it in front, Subaru folded his arms and sighed. Then, Subaru, it kind of feels like it's been a long time since we last came here. Amelia? We just found the stairway. What's wrong all of a sudden? Amelia's eyes widened with surprise at Subaru's remark. Subaru shook his head and turned to his companions, with whom together they had experienced the general nastiness the creator of the tower gave off. He recollected a bit of peace at the sight of their unchanged faces. Beatrice, Subaru, why are you wrapping your fingers around Betty's? Subaru, kinda wanted to feel like I'm really here. Ahem, I'm good. My bad. Faced with a rising suspicion in her face, Subaru forced a smile at Beatrice, but still kept her hand in his. Then, he turned around and pointed to the great stairway. Subaru, now then, getting back on track. The great stairway was always here, and no one just really noticed, is not what the case is here, right? Julius, I believe it is quite unthinkable to have not noticed such an obvious spectacle. However, if it were to be limited to only this room, then I cannot deny that possibility. Subaru, say what? Anastasia, that uncertainty in the middle of exploration, huh? I get that. Taking Subaru's doubt in stride, the master-servant duo of Anastasia and Julius nodded in agreement. Seeing that, Subaru tilted his head slightly, while Amelia raised her hand. Amelia, about back when Subaru was still sleeping, we all gathered at the 4th floor. REM and Patrash were resting in the green room, and we were challenging the puzzle on the 3rd floor, so we were walking around to see where we could put our luggage. Beatrice, we were all unconsciously avoiding this room. Looking back. Subaru, so maybe, something from the outside was blocking this room out of our minds, or something like that. What Amelia started was continued by Beatrice, while Subaru brought it to its conclusion. Both Amelia and Beatrice nodded to that theory, and Anastasia and Julius agreed to it. Once the great stairway was discovered, everyone thought about the room and noticed the mind block. If that were the case, then maybe the great stairway was always present in this room, and there was some kind of magic that camouflaged it so it could not be noticed. Subaru, well, if not for that, when we finished solving the slab puzzle of the 3rd floor, if there was anyone in this room, they might have gotten flattened by the sudden appearance of the stairs. Julius, Subaru, it is not a slab, but a monolith. Let us refer to it the same way. I would like to avoid confusion. Subaru, monolith, monolith, monolith. Satisfied? Let's continue. Although Julius looked dissatisfied with Subaru's apathetic response, Subaru was fed up with it, so he ignored him. He turned to the two who had not taken part in the conversation till now: Shala, who was playing around beside the stairway, and Meili, who was on her back. Shala, MN? Something up, master? Ah. Could it be, it's my turn to useful? I'll do anything for master. I'll even become your co-endorser. Subaru, you don't get what you're saying at all, do you? That's not something you should become, even if it's your mom, dad, sibling, or even friend telling you to do it. Just in case, I'll ask, so, did you know? Shala, definitely, I've been living here for a few hundred years now, but this is the first time I'm seeing these stairs. Subaru, Meili, it's fine to play around. Pull on the scorpion tail hard. Meili, I'd do it even if you don't tell me, Oni-san. Shala, it hurts, it hurts, it hurts. As usual, Shala was useless when it came to conquering the tower. Leaving it to Meili to punish her accordingly, Subaru looked up to the great stairway again. Unlike the pair that led up to the 4th floor, the great stairway was not spiral-shaped. Normally, a stairway would be a singular path leading up to the next floor. However, for this particular one to cross the 3rd floor, and lead directly to the 2nd, was something that would look weird for the tower given its shape. One would think that, subsequently, the structure would cause the floor to protrude outside of the tower. Subaru, maybe it's making up for that using the power of mystery. Amelia, or maybe it just looks like it leads up to the 2nd floor, but it goes to a completely different place. Would that be too mean? Subaru, I'm scared that Amelia-tan's pureness will get tainted by the tower creator's awful personality. I want to conquer this place faster. Amelia, Amelia tilted her head to the side, not quite understanding. However, it was Amelia who found this great stairway, and it was also her who uncovered an important hint in solving the mystery of the 3rd floor. The building called Watchtower Pleiades, or rather, Great Library Pleiades, had a number of very nasty gimmicks that reflected the designer's personality. While being very reliable with her solving obstacles one after another, Subaru, who wanted to spend his days in peace with her, worried that her personality might get twisted because of this. Subaru, saying that, our pace has been pretty nice so far. I cleared the 3rd floor's trial on my first try, and we're already 1/3 done with conquering the tower in under just 3 days too. Beatrice, compared to how there was no progress in 400 years, this would be a great pace, I suppose. Subaru, it's pretty damn lit thinking that way. But then, I'm the kinda amazing guy who's moving forward history that's been stalling for the past hundreds of years. As a history mover, my power word gained strong. In the recent past, he had gathered the participants in the White Whale subjugation, crushed the witch cult's Archbishop of Sinsloth and annihilated the Great Rabbit, helped partly in clearing the ordeal at the tomb of the Witch of Greed, defeated the Archbishop of Singreed, and finally, set foot on the never-before-explored Watchtower Pleiades, cleared one of its never-before-challenged trials and was now on the way to challenging the second of those trials. Subaru, if I'm just listing all my achievements and skip the process, I'll only look like an idiot. He had died several times to accomplish all that, so at the same time, he could not exactly puff his chest. Despite that, history had indeed advanced a bit too far in the past year. He had not intended this, but at the very least, he had to settle things with Archbishop's gluttony and lust, so the world better be prepared for it is how he felt about the matter. Subaru, whe what? What's up, Amelia Tan, holding my hand suddenly. Something wrong? Amelia, no. It's just, I think Subaru should be a little bit more nicer to himself. Subaru, yeah no, you'll have a hard time finding someone who's as soft on himself as me. It's enough with Amelia Tan and Biko, any more is just too much. REM would be added to that list whenever she wakes up. She would be a bit strict, but kind nonetheless. And adding Petra, Patrash, Garfield, and even Otto to that would leave no room for Subaru to go easy on himself. Amelia. Amelia's lips shook faintly, as if trying to search for some way to respond to him, but she only kept on looking at Subaru. Lightening his grip on her hand, Subaru cocked his head. However, Anastasia, at this point, I think this here's a problem of the root of Natsuki-kun's being. It's not something that'll get better in a day or two. I suppose it depends on how Amelia-san goes about it though. Breaking into the conversation with a clap of her hands, Anastasia shot a glance at Amelia. Amelia looked back, her expression earnest, but it seemed to not be the reaction she had intended so. Anastasia, I feel like there's very little hope for that. Not that it'd suit you. Amelia, I don't think I understand, but if you show me how, I'll try my best. Anastasia, I'm afraid I'll have to refuse. I'm not too fond of getting kicked by an earth dragon. Subaru, getting kicked by an earth dragon. I wonder if it means something like getting kicked by a horse. Setting aside Garfield's weird phrases, Subaru added in a new phrase that might be common in this isekai. In any case, for Subaru, that was not the end of the confusing info being thrown around in Amelia and Anastasia's conversation. At one point, he and Amelia both kept tilting their heads at every other line, to the point that Anastasia sighed and pointed to the great stairway. Anastasia, when are we going to quit dawdling and go up? Whatever's waiting might be harder than the third floor. Or maybe Natsuki-kun will end up clearing it right away. Subaru, to tell you the truth, if it's something as annoying as the puzzle on the third floor, I'm not feeling too hot about it. To be honest, the only reason Subaru was able to clear the third floor Teijididest trial was because knowledge about stars and constellations was critical to clearing it. Constellations that too, knowledge from Subaru's original world, was required to solve the puzzle. In fact, Subaru believed that the constructor of this tower was from another world, modern times at that too, just like him. In that respect, it was highly likely that the second floor's trial required modern knowledge as well, where Subaru's presence would prove useful, but Subaru, things might be different compared to the third floor. I can't do much if it's something I don't know. The name Flugels Germanic, and I don't know much about Germany's history anyway. A vague anxiety swirled in him, but he could not voice it, so to keep everyone's expectations. In both Amelia and Beatrice's eyes, Subaru was weak. Thus, he wanted to do whatever was possible by dragging out whatever little knowledge he had of Germany. Subaru, can't help it. The stairs up are literally right in front. I can't call myself a man if I step back now. Let's just pop in there and breeze through the challenge. Julius, unfortunately, aside from you and I, there are only women here. Subaru, it's just a saying, don't put a damper on it, you. Alright, let's go, Biko. Beatrice, Njaya in fact. Julius doused the burning spirit Subaru had in his clenched fist, but Subaru simply stuck his tongue out to him, and pulled Beatrice into his arms and ran straight up the stairs. Amelia, Subaru, wait. Seeing his enthusiastic jump up, Amelia clambered behind him, while Julius and Anastasia slumped their shoulders in unison, and followed after. Meili, barely clothed One-san? Aren't you going? Shala, yap it with the barely clothed already, ankle biter number 2. I'm properly clothed, you see. I've got an arrow kawaii thing going on, see. Master chose this for me, so stop complaining about it. Meili, I'm not really complaining, just hurry up, come on, or we'll get left behind. Shala, you're really bossy even though you're just riding on my bad ankle biter. I'll tell on you to Master later. Actually, I want to just teach you some manners myself. Shala put her foot on the stairs as she shook her reddened face, scorpion tail flailing about. With vigor unseeming for a person carrying someone on their back, she jumped from the first step of the great stairway to the fifth, and kept running. Shala, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Ignoring what was happening behind, Subaru kept on running up the stairs with Beatrice in his arms. In the middle of it, Beatrice had skillfully changed her position to that of a Princess Carrie and narrowed her blue eyes at Subaru. Beatrice, as I thought, there is something tweaking the sense of space here I suppose. We haven't gotten out of the tower even though we came so far in a straight line, in fact. Subaru, maybe we couldn't just tell from the outside, but the tower might really be shaped like that too. Beatrice, for just this one stairway to be jutting out? If that was so, then there needs to be something that makes the tower look tower-like. Otherwise, there is no point in hiding the stairway, in fact. Subaru, I guess so. I just felt like saying it out loud. Subaru sighed as he agreed with Beatrice's reasoning and looked overhead. Strangely enough, even though he was running up the stairs, the floor above seemed no closer than before. No matter how much he ran, it felt like he was going up using a down escalator. Subaru, no way, to think that the harassment Emilia was talking about would actually happen. That there was only a stairway prepared, and it actually did not connect to the second floor. As Subaru gave this theory more thought, the space overhead opened up at the same time. Subaru, oh. Beatrice, hiya. Faced with sudden bright light in the poorly lit stone-cut stairway, Subaru and Beatrice shouted at the same time. At some point, while continuously moving forward, the stairs had ended, and they had stepped onto a new floor. Which was? Subaru, a white room, again, huh? Beatrice, I suppose. He stopped and carefully put Beatrice down from his arms. It was a surprisingly long climb up the stairs. Despite his stamina having improved, he could not stop himself from crouching over his knees and breathing heavily. While stroking his back, Beatrice tapped the floor with the tip of her toe and looked around the room. Subaru gulped and did the same. To the two who had reached the top of the stairs first, the room was a spitting image of the third floor Tejido Estral, a white expanse. A mysterious structure where both the floor and the ceiling extended far beyond the reach of the eye, and the basis of distance itself seemed to be skewed. No doubt the only reason this white space was registered as a place was only because of the small space with the stairs that was open on the ground leading to the floor below, just like it was on the third floor. Emilia, this room again? And from that same open space popped up Emilia and the others, all bearing similar reactions to the scenery of white, and all dropped their shoulders in dejection. It was obvious with the presentation that another trial was about to commence. Subaru, any chance we just came to the third floor again by mistake? Emilia, I don't think so. There were 54 steps in the stairway between the fourth and third floors. This one here had 444 steps. That's almost 10 times more steps we needed to get here, right? Subaru, you were counting, Emilia-tan? Emilia, Fufu, the truth is, counting the number of steps is a secret hobby I recently picked up. Why are you patting my head? Subaru and the others took turns in patting Emilia's head after she boasted about her hobby. Even Julius and Meili, who refrained from doing so, looked on with delicate pity. Emilia, it feels kinda, really weird, you know. Subaru, we really couldn't have done it without Emilia-tan. Thanks to you, we know we've gone up 10 times higher than the third floor. Kinda makes you think if we've just jumped way up to the first floor. I'd like to go with that, but for now, I think we should consider that this is the second floor. Beatrice, the trial is supposed to begin, in fact. That over there might be how, I suppose. Putting away Emilia's doubts for later, Subaru looked to where Beatrice pointed straight ahead from coming up the stairs. There was a spectacle that caught one's eye. Even on the third floor Tejido, there was something similar in the center of the room. And upon touching it, the trial would commence. If the case was the same here as well then. Julius, it's not a monolith, but a sword. Narrowing his golden eyes, Julius spoke as he gazed upon it, which stuck out of the ground. Exactly as he stated, within the white expanse stood not a monolith like the third floor, but it was a sword. Without sheath, it stood straight, tip pierced into the white floor. The way it stood absolutely straight, hilt facing up, was a terrifying beauty that reflected in Subaru's eyes. It was not as if they're gorgeous decorations, nor did Subaru know its material was of high quality. Only that, in its non-decorative simpleness, in its making of minimal use of steel, there was something beautiful. Subaru, from the looks of it, it's supposed to work like a sort of selection. Julius. Subaru, yes, you were really patient. Good boy, good boy. Julius held back his words when he noticed the picturesque scene of Subaru whispering to a sword. Putting aside Anastasia's silent praise for Julius who was watching, Subaru set his eyes on Shala. She had her arms crossed and her chest puffed, face brimming with confidence. The kind that read, "You can ask me whatever you want, I'm completely ready to say I have no clue." So, Subaru, without having asked a word, was forced to finally step towards the sword. Emilia, Subaru. Subaru, I think it's fine. It's not a trap that casts instant death on you, if it's anything like the third floor. Nodding his head to a distressed Emilia, Subaru took a step towards the sword of selection. Of course, Emilia and Beatrice tagged along naturally. The rest remained on standby at the mouth of the stairs, ready to react in case anything happened. Subaru, careful about making a getaway road for Anastasia. It's a pretty long way down, so if she trips, she'll keep on rolling till she dies. Julius, I will keep it in mind. Rather, you ought to be more mindful of Emilia-sama and Beatrice-sama's warnings. Emilia, it's okay. I'll protect Subaru. Subaru, alright, I'll let myself be protected. Watching Subaru flashing a thumbs up to a very enthusiastic Emilia, Julia sighed. After seeing it through, Subaru faced the sword of selection in front. A distance where if he just reached out, he could touch it. At that point, the presence of the sword brought out a certain sense of reality. That, like the monolith, there was no mysterious feel to it. Subaru, that said, it's a sword that has been stuck here since the tower was built. That there's not even a speck of rust on it is itself pretty weird. Subaru whispered in front of the sword of selection, then took a light breath, breathed out, then stretched his hand towards the handle. Wrapping his fingers neatly around it, he felt it was slightly resisting him, but he still put strength into pulling it up. For a moment, doubt flashed in everyone's minds about whether Subaru would be able to pull it out, if it truly were the sword of selection, but the thought turned out to be in vain. Upon applying the slightest bit of strength, the sharp edge that was stuck in the floor came out easily. It truly was with as elegance as a sword could have, as if it were thrust out of its sheath. At that immediate moment, it echoed. Gain his forgiveness by hand of the fool who has reached the heavenly sword. TCH. A voice that bore through eardrums and resonated directly in their skulls told them of the details of the trial. It was an expected turn of events, so he had not done something as unsavory as dropping the sword. It was nonetheless an unpleasant experience. After all, the voice that echoed in his head was very much like himself. Subaru, feels like getting carsick. I guess everyone feels that way too. Did everyone hear, or was it limited to Subaru, who had pulled out the sword? Everyone had heard the voice when someone touched the monolith. So, this time too, Subaru turned around with that thought and noticed that everyone's breaths were caught, and they were looking at a single point. Following their line of sight, Subaru also looked. The place they were all looking at was a point further ahead of the sword of selection, at a place that coincidentally equaled the distance between the sword and staircase. And at that place, the shadowy silhouette of a person had appeared. Voice, gain his forgiveness, by hand of the fool who has reached the heavenly sword. A voice that was supposed to be whispering, suddenly sounded very loud to Subaru. A voice that repeated the same words he had heard when he pulled out the sword. However, it was nothing like his own voice that echoed in his head, but undoubtedly was being spoken by the silhouette with a different voice. Voice, gain his forgiveness, by hand of the fool who has reached the heavenly sword. The voice, as if it were an idiot taught to repeat only one sentence, spun the same words again. Whether the voice seemed mechanical, automatic, or even instinctual, could not be determined. The subtle tremble of the voice was apparent in the repetition of those eerie words. They were terribly direct, as if an edge of a sword were tickling the silhouette's heart. Whether the tremble was from fear or from passion or from pleasure or from grief, could also not be determined. For it to play around with others' emotions so well, was proof that there was a distinct gap between it and a living creature. At this distance from just being a voice, it played with lives. Gain his forgiveness, by hand of the fool who has reached the heavenly sword. It was a man with simple yet long, red hair, that flowed down his back. He was quite tall. A full head above Subaru, the man's body was adorned with thick muscles befitting his height. He wore not armor, but a casual crimson robe that contributed nothing in protection from his right side down to his arm. His chest lay exposed, and his waist was bound with a white sash. His flaming red hair reached up to the middle of his back, and his left eye was covered by a shorty black eye patch. Finally, the right eye that remained uncovered was a blue reflection of an unreachable sky. Surely, it was such a well-ordered beauty that would make anyone and everyone turn around and take a look, a sight fit for a painting. That savage, cruel smile filled with insanity spoiled it all. It was a most exceedingly beautiful, ferocious beast. The most beautiful beast that existed in this world, to the point that Subaru forgot to breathe in its presence. Shala, hi. The illusion of the stillness of time was broken by a soft whisper. Swiftly he heard a girl's voice squeak out a Kaya dash. At the edge of his eyes, he saw the figure of the girl whose black hair reached her backside. At his side Shala dropped to the floor, while Meili's eyes darted around, confused. Shala, hi. If anything, Shora was so upset that she could be incontinent. With her eyes open wide, her face twisted in a way unbefitting a girl as beautiful as her, the depth madness of the fear she felt was expressed clearly. If it were possible, she would have left the room according to her instincts. Only, her trembling legs did not permit it. The very Shala who utterly destroyed the centaur creature was stiff with fear? Man, gain his forgiveness, by hand of the fool who has reached the heavenly sword. Even with the frightened Shala in sight, the voice continued repeating those words. At first glance, it seemed to be a situation that rose in eeriness levels. However, there was something else he noticed. The man did not move a single step, only ever exerting pressure from where he stood. No, the man did not even try to exude pressure. He simply stood still. Just by being there, his existence gave off the same presence as that of a witch. Subaru, tch. Holding his breath, he forced his eyelids, that had forgotten to blink, to close and took a moment to calm down. And then, without taking his eyes off the man for even a second, Subaru took a step backward. In his right hand was the sword of selection, in his left was Beatrice's hand held firm. He pulled her stiff form back. Subaru, Emilia. Emilia, I know. Knowing he could not leave her behind, Subaru called out Emilia's name, knowing she was still petrified. Even so, Emilia nodded in response. Matching his movements with her shaking knees, Subaru shrunk away slowly. Man, gain his forgiveness, by hand of the fool who has reached the heavenly sword. The distance widened. Even so, the man remained unmoving. Only, he repeated the same words. Man, gain his forgiveness, by hand of the fool who has reached the heavenly sword. He poured his all into his nerves, and finally arrived at where Shala was lying. Shala's face was stiff with fear as usual, and Meili had grabbed onto her arm, unable to move. To take the girls and retreat from this place. Would that even be possible? Subaru's hands, both the one that held the sword, and the other that held Beatrice's hand, were stiff, with no signs of being able to move them. He could not even imagine being able to force up Shala and Meili by grabbing their arms. In the first place, would that man allow that? What was that man's objective? What was the trial for, and what purpose did the sword have? Man, gain his forgiveness, by hand of the fool who has reached the heavenly sword. The words that were being repeated, the phrase, that was the proposal of the second-floor Electra's trial. What meaning could there be in the man repeating those words? The contents of the trial he had heard about the moment he pulled out the sword, the man who repeated those words, the fool, and forgiveness, what exactly? Man, gained, forgiveness, heavenly sword, fool. Subaru, huh? Quickening his thoughts, the feeling that something terrible is going to happen kept rising in Subaru, and at the same time, the man whose voice kept resonating without stop, came to a swift halt. Subaru instinctively groaned, a careless act that made Emilia and Beatrice a bit more nervous, but that had no effect on the change taking place. More than that, the changes the man underwent were becoming much clearer. Man, heavenly sword, fool, his forgiveness, oh. Subaru, what? What's gonna happen? Man, Shala, Pijai. Subaru, Dawa? Stopping was far from it. Rather, there was a strange string of sounds at the end of the standing man's words, and in the next moment, the man put a hand on his hair, began scratching, and pelted an explosive shout. Suddenly unable to stand it, Shala squealed like a pig and leapt to Subaru. Naturally, he could not keep standing. Her arms coiled around him with all her strength, and unable to take evasive action, Subaru tumbled to the floor with her. Subaru, tch. In the instant of the explosion, sparks flew in his eyes, while both the man's shout and Shala's incessant crying, who still clung to his waist, pounded his eardrums. Man, Shala, hi. Master, help. I don't wanna. Help me. Subaru, what's with you for the past few minutes? Man, shut up already. My head's already killing me as it is. Stop shoutin'. Shala, a foe. Right before his words of comfort could reach, Shala's spirit crumbled. Despite having been thrashing about for some reason, she quietly stuck to Subaru's waist and stopped moving, and losing her consciousness, she collapsed to the floor. No way you. Boku. Shala swiftly and gracefully departed from the battlefront via fainting. Although help from her when it came to conquering the tower was close to nil, even from the examiner's point of view, this was supposed to be completely unexpected. For a woman whose brute strength deserved a certificate, if nothing else to be this afraid of this man, things would certainly be precarious. Julius, I take it that you are by no means a simple existence. Man on? The man groaned in displeasure when a footstep echoed. With a clack of his pair of white shoes, stepped forward the excellent knight. Julius twirled around and picked up the sword Subaru had dropped. Watching him, the man's lips curved down, a scowl plastered his face. Man, hell's up, you. And what's with this place? You fucking around here, you? Julius, no, we are doing nothing of the sort. We too are of a similarly confused standing. You appeared here all of a sudden. We cannot help but be on guard, is what I would like to convey. Man, hell's up with you. Don't be talking weird, you. Don't you be talking like my follower, you. You my follower? Ya ain't, right? Since ya ain't, don't be talking like him, making all this shit confusing. The man's mood kept turning sour each time Julius spoke with an expected respectful yet careful tone. Though it was becoming clearer that the man was human, whether conversation with him could be established was an entirely different topic. Man, pretty lookin', hot stuff, runt, follower, small fry. Julius, unfortunately, I am not your follower. Man, the way you talk, it's just how my follower talks. Stop copying it. The man belched out a good-humored laugh at Julius' objection. Coupling unusually white teeth with an oddly handsome face, his shark-like smile reeked of madness. Finally, a bit of humanity was found within the smiling man. Or rather, finding out that the man was an intelligent being capable of conversation would be more appropriate. Man, why you? Explain what's happening here, you. The hell you do to me, you? Don't you be hiding stuff, you. Get to it, you. Subaru, appearing out of nowhere, acting like you're hot shit. What's up with that? Man on? The man thrust his hand into the open part of his bare chest and scratched carelessly. Subaru, who finally raised his body, squeezed out what words he could muster and spat them at the man. He simply glared at Subaru with his right eye, who was lying on the floor, and... Man, hell's with ya. Why were you sleeping, you? Ain't that a real nice place, you? Getting that hot a woman to be a meat bed, you? Switch up with me, you. Subaru, sadly, with respect to the person herself, I refuse. Somewhat stopping his shaking feet, Subaru stood. At the same time, he pried the clinging Shala off. It was a careless act that made her fall to the floor face first, but there was no time to consider that. But... Man, on. What, it's you? You doing that? Fucking round, you? Subaru, the hell you's pulling that rude shit for, you? Man, The man bit clenched his molars and roared a hearty yet violent laughter. Ignoring Subaru, who was clearly confused, the man looked over the white room and nodded to himself, oh alrighty, then spoke again. Man, gotcha. So then, let's start. Subaru, start. Wait. Why do you keep on running the conversation all by yourself? It's really too much to take. Man, zip it, you. Keepin' on yappin' over and over, already explained while I was sleep talkin', didn't I? Pay attention to what I'm sayin', you. Subaru, what's with this for the past few minutes? Man, gain his forgiveness, by hand of the fool who has reached the heavenly sword. Unable to keep up with the situation, Subaru's eyes darted around, while Amelia repeatedly whispered the sentence, word for word, to herself. Slowly, the girl started depetrifying. Following Julius and Subaru, out came Amelia and Beatrice from the stillness of time, and Anastasia and Meili right afterwards. Only Shala remained unconscious, however. Man, that beauty over there's different from this here small fry. If I'd been alive, I'd be betting you tonight, you. Looking close, you're real sweet, you. What's with that face? You're real damn frizzlin', you. Amelia, frizz. Subaru, hey you. You're the guy. You're the examiner here, right? From looking at Amelia, a lust awakened in his eyes. Putting himself between those two, Subaru stood and pointed at the man. The man smiled like a shark at the statement and... Man, no clue. Ain't interested in some title someone's put on themselves. I me, use you. Nothing more to it than that. You wanna talk with me proper? Get me to move even a step from here, you. Julius. They were the words of a man standing defenselessly, calmly. As for why he had not laughed it off, it was the very condition that needed to be fulfilled to clear the trial. Thus, it was a task worthy of being called as such. Gain his forgiveness, by hand of the fool who has reached the heavenly sword. If the man who stood in front were to be this fool who has reached the heavenly sword, then the method to get it was clear. What was left was to see if that method was indeed even possible. Julius, Knight of the Imperial Order of the Kingdom of Lubunica, Julius Euchelius. Before the fight, nay, the trial began, Julius offered his name as an act of courtesy. It was an act of the greatest honor, declaring the other as their equal, regardless of position or gender. In response, the man's one blue eye narrowed with excitement, and brought forth an unusual sword spirit and... Man, ain't got no name worth givin' ya, just a mere stick swinger, I am. Trial of the second floor Electra of the Great Library Pleiades. Time limit condition, unlimited. Number of challenge attempts condition, unlimited. Challengers condition, unlimited. Trial, initiated. Chapter 26, Stick Swinger. There was a woman, all by herself. The woman's spirit had been violated. The woman lay deep in the abyss of insanity. The woman was standing upon the farthest land of starvation. Growling in the solitary castle, gnawing the unoccupied throne, breaking her teeth, ripping up her mouth, starving. The woman had been a human when she was born, but at that point in time, she no longer remained human. It all began a few years ago, when the man governing those lands fell victim to an incurable illness. Weakening by the day, the man, frightened of his approaching death, stretched his hands to all kinds of means in order to prolong his life. Before long he attained techniques which were taboo, and gathered a large number of lives for an outrageous immorality for the purpose of attaining a long life. Abundantly, lives were sacrificed, abundantly, lives were rendered idle, and among those sacrifices was the woman. Who she was, what her name was, what her birthplace was, who her family was, such memories of hers had already been burnt away. Merely a tool was the woman. A seedbed for the man nearly awaiting his death, having been eaten away by the demon of ill health. Idle lives only to be wasted, that was how it was supposed to be, yet the woman survived. A body ruined, power gushing forth, the lamp of a life ostracized by what is called time. The hopes, dearest wishes of the man trespassed by the demon of ill health, materialized upon the woman's body. The man was delighted at the fruits of his labor, postponing the memorial for those sacrificed, overbearingly unfastened the woman's constraints. When she came to notice, the woman was alone, in the uninhabited solitary castle, anguishing and suffering with starvation. Thoughts disappearing with cruel hunger, memories devoured into a void by violent thirst. She had nothing in her memories. She had nothing within her understanding. Merely, her entire body had constraints, so she possessed no freedom either. Eating away all food within the castle, vomiting out the content of her stomach, chewing and digesting them once again, she continued to repeat. Ultimately, for what remained of her starvation, she bit into the stone walls, crunched the throne, ate the carpets. At that pace, she would starve to death. Her body, which cannot die, would starve to death. Grrr, growling. Grrr, growling. At the extremity of starvation, unable to obtain trance, the woman finally saw an illusion. Inside the solitary castle, bustling about with willful freedom, was a horde of dogs clad in bestial hair. Even if it was a hallucination, she did not mind. If she was unable to be satiated physically, she desired to satisfy merely her heart. With such wholeheartedness the woman crawled, devouring the beasts. Devoured the beasts. Ate them away. She was being satisfied. The following instant she vomited. She licked what had been vomited. She chewed. Vomited, ate. In the illusion, in the mirage, in the hallucination, in her desire, there present was taste. There present was form. She could feel it on her tongue. When she came to notice, the interior of the castle had become a den of repulsive beasts. Aha, 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 aha. She was greatly delighted. Buried in days of eating and getting eaten, she was satisfied after she ate, and she vomited after she was satisfied. Stuck between starvation and refusing food, the woman ate and vomited, slurped and spilled. Given birth to by the empty skies, no, given rebirth to, were the beasts with a repulsive presence. Before she noticed, the woman's constraints were exposed to the battle for devouring between the beasts and her, came loose, and she was freed. Attaining freedom, the woman crawled, exited the castle. The beasts as well, following the woman, exited the castle. Upon the earth, in all directions, they scattered around. Hunger, starvation, unable to endure them, the woman devoured, and kept the castle she had grown tired of eating for later. To visit it, when the day of the satisfaction of her hunger and thirst arrives. The witch of gluttony gave birth to the horde of witch beasts, and continued to starve from inexhaustible starvation. On the second floor Electra of the Pleiades watchtower, in the room white as chalk, the trial began. The examiner stood in the corner of the room, a man with red hair, and the smile of a shark plastered on his face. Introducing himself as not but a stick swinger, the man's aura overflowed with an unusual sword spirit. The way he appeared was in itself complicated. Even Shala herself, who was the supposed caretaker of the watchtower, had fainted the moment she laid eyes on him. As such, he was obviously no one ordinary. Thus, Julius, I will, from the first moment, fight at full power. Man. Leaning forward, Julius spoke as he took a step forward. The blade he softly threw towards the man was the same sword of selection that had been stuck into the floor of Electra. The sword spun in the air, flying in an arc, before it stabbed the ground near the man's feet. So that the man may simply stretch out his hand to take it. Man, hell's you doin', you? Throwin' me a sword and all, you got a death wish? Julius, unfortunately, as a knight, it is most shameful an act to swing a sword at one unarmed. Man, makin' me laugh. Ain't empty-handed, take a closer look, you. The man roared with laughter, teeth bared, at the advancing Julius. And while laughing, he casually raised his foot in the air, and gave a wild kick to the sword. The sword of selection gave a shrill wail as it flew off. It screeched inches past Julius, who had lunged towards the man. Julius, TCH. I hope you bear no regret for speaking those words. His thoughtfulness coldly cast aside, Julius' face cheek stiffened as he swung out his knight's sword. The slender blade he raised in a straight line, as a hammer to strike at those insolent enough to disgrace the grounds of a duel. It pierced forward, swift as lightning, but... Man, don't be shoutin' all cutesy there, bouffon. You got a nice damn face. Wouldn't you be troubled if you get off on ol' me cryin'? Julius, wah? TCH. With a thunderous boom, the tip stopped before reaching the man's torso. Of course, Julius had not slackened his hand. He always tried to the best of his abilities, regardless of the situation. Thus, it was not him that stopped the blade, but rather the man bearing the smile of a shark. Julius, impossible. Man, gotta believe what you see. It all starts from there, you know. Cackling with joyous laughter, the stick swinger raised his right hand and scratched his chest. It was the same behavior as before. Just like the time he was piling up on a nonsense conversation. However, his left hand pinched the tip of Julius' sword, with frightening accuracy. That too with... Julius, a pair of twigs? Man, look here, it's not even close. What, ya eyes bad or something, you? Chopsticks, it's chopsticks. Pretty nice for grabbin' snacks, them chopsticks. Is why I keep 'em on me. So slender, one had to squint to properly see the pair of wooden sticks. The stick swinger held them in his left hand and used them with grace and dexterity, similar to how Subaru knew them to be used, who had reflexively groaned upon seeing them. Chopsticks indeed existed in this world, as he had witnessed and experienced during his stay at Pristella, but to witness one use them with such finesse was a first. No, regardless of the finesse one possessed in their use, to stop the swing of a first-class swordsman using a pair of chopsticks was absolutely an inhuman feat. Man, ha! Don't be making me laugh, you. Swingin' at the best angle, with the best speed, with the best feelin', in the best weighty chopsticks or whatever, there's nothing it can't cut. Julius, goo, TCH. Rolling his eyes over the awestruck faces, the stick swinger yawned, then spoke with a stab of sarcasm. But while it was normal for everyone to be silent when shown such a spectacle, Julius, the concerned party, could not. He put strength into his arm and pulled to pry away the knight's sword that remained stuck between the pair of chopsticks. However, no matter how much strength he put in, the sword would not budge. Man, lemme tell you though, this here ain't made out of something funny. Bad material's just bad for the skin, so. Got nothing mixed in, just your everyday pair, made from some tree somewhere. Julius, KH. Man, let it out, let it out. Best be Logan, you. Whoever's Logan's more of a looker. Not that it matters, you bein' a guy. Suddenly, the block he felt at the tip of his sword was gone, leaving Julius bewildered. In that instant, the man turned his body, and leapt into the air with his two bare feet. With tremendous force, he landed a kick right above Julius' slender waist, sending him flying. Julius. Subaru did not know who raised their voice in a scream, but they had no choice but to watch his flight, as everyone had to put in much more thought before making any kind of sudden movement. And now, following him as he soared across the air, unable to fix his posture. Man, ka. The stick swinger's figure shot off like a bullet, chasing right after Julius. With unbelievable physical prowess, he stopped right above Julius and took stance with a chopstick in each hand and released a flurry of slashes aimed at Julius. Whether they could be called slashes was up for debate, but regardless, the man unleashed a violent flurry of strikes with the chopsticks. With movements so fast, each separate strike seemed to disappear. It appeared the same way to everyone, and Julius was already helpless midair, so he had no way of dodging. With his knight's sword as his only ally, Julius met each chopstick slash with his own. However, the chopstick slipped past, as if sneering, and stabbed into Julius again and again and again and again and again. G-walled. A ray of heat shot across the air, aimed towards the engaged duo. White light, in its most simple form, can rip through the world with its dreadful edge. In other words, it can become an invisible blade that tears, cuts and burns through everything in its path. It went straight, and was as such, easy to dodge. However, the shimmering rays traveled at the speed of light, crashing straight into its target. Even so, the stick swinger cut away the rays of light fired by the third party with ease. Man, my sword can cut even like you. Faster than his own gruff voice's echo, the chopstick struck and sliced through the ray of light. An impossible spectacle that pulled in the attention of everyone present. Only the man sneered, as if he had done something ordinary, and continued jabbing at Julius with his free hand. As if making light of him. No, the truth was, he indeed was making very light of him. TCH. Jaiwayowald. In response to that, his eyes turned red, overlapping with the chant. With both arms spread wide, chanting for the magic that shot rays of heat, her graceful composure painted with panic, was Anastasia. Hands open, all fingers poised, 10 fingers in total shot out 10 death rays simultaneously, all danced in the air as they approached the stick swinger. And the stick swinger himself took just as an amazing measure. Man, ka. The stick swinger faced the dancing beams head-on and sliced through them with his chopsticks just like before, then he pounced up by kicking off of thin air, and made a nosedive taking Julius, who was right below, along with him, dragging him across the white floor as he ran. Julius was pinned by the chopsticks in his solar plexus. Man, ka. Aim well, you. Can't even swat a fly like that. They don't call me a lady killer for nothing, you. Ka. Anastasia, Jewald. Jywald. Anastasia still chose to continue her attacks against the cackling man. Unfortunately, regardless of its firepower, if the magic does not hit, it has no meaning. Even with her firing them all over, the man simply cut through, at times ducked, and at times made a sharp spin by putting his weight on Julius. His overwhelming physical and battle prowess in full display clashed against Anastasia's clearly poor aim. In this case, technically it was not Anastasia whose aim was poor, but Echidna's, who was currently inhabiting that body. Despite wishing to aid Julius with a surprise magic attack, her actions severely failed her intentions, leaving her unable to even get a scratch in. Soon, Anastasia, a.k.h. Man on? Her time, it would seem, would run out first. The stick swinger, who was gleefully dodging the heat rays, stopped and raised his eyebrows when the rays halted their pursuit. At the end of his gaze was Anastasia, who had collapsed to the ground. Blood flowed from her nostrils, a sign that she had overworked her own body. She had stated it herself earlier. She could not rely on her trump card, as it would shave away her own life. Julius, Anastasia-sama. Man. Vigor instilled by the sight of his falling master, Julius broke free of his defense-only stance, free from being slid around on his back, free from the relentless blows of the chopsticks of the stick swinger. He had took off the button near his chest and flung away his knight's mantle, forcing the direction of friction to change, allowing him to get out of the cycle. From his position on the floor, he aimed a circular kick at the man's head, cursing his own foolishness. The man moved his chin away slightly, escaping the blow, but Julius repeated his kicks 2 more times like a breakdance. After a few rounds of kicks and dodging, he stood back up. Man, you really pulled a good one, you. Felt that good, you. Julius, I don't have time for your nonsense. Move it. Their absolute difference in ability was something Julius understood too well, yet still roared at him. His knight's sword, even after the countless blows he had taken, had not left his hand. So the sword flew, slithering through the air in a show of swordsmanship of the utmost grace and elegance, even while being worn down with righteous cause and a sense of duty. It may have been the finest display of a knight's swordsmanship. A countless number of days, of months must have been spent, shed tears and blood training to refine his technique. And yet, man, playin' with me, you? You playin' me? Don't be going light on me, you. Julius, TCH. Man, what's this? Don't make me laugh, you. Don't be holding back, give me all you got, you. Are you serious about this? If this all you got, man, what a letdown, you. His thrusts were stopped, slashes, blown away, barrages, shot down, and his one-shots, parried. The technique Julius had built up, his own essence as a knight, were all denied by the swaying pair of frighteningly beautiful, violent, and powerful chopsticks, wielded by a man who kept yawning, who named himself only as a mere stick swinger. Half his life was being trampled over by a pair of measly twigs. Man, you ain't like this usually, you. Why's you fightin' all lonesome? That ain't how you fight, is it? You ain't used to it, that's why all this borin' me, you. Julius, I am. Man, if you wanna tend to your girl, I'll let ya. Borrow a pair of thick thighs and get babed, you ugly failure of a swordsman. That which flashed across his face, was it wrath? Pain? Regret? Despair? In any case, one can never truly know what lies within others. Julius' sword flashed, his thin knight's sword, as it did likely millions of times before, tracing across the air. Anyone watching, even from the sidelines with untrained eyes, could tell it was a swing full of faults. The chopsticks dove into the flash from the side. In the next moment, sailing through the air, the wood tore through the steel of the knight's sword with a faint cry. Julius' knight's sword snapped in two. His yellow eyes could only widen and follow the sight of his beloved sword's tip as it spun across the air. How long had he been using that sword? What history did he share with it? None knew. Only, what broke hadn't been limited to his sword. Man, off with ya. Accompanying the spat-out words were giant fists that were thrown at his face. It was the most unrefined and primitive kind of violence. A violence that was prevalent from a time long before man had any kind of tools that utilized one's own flesh. Man. The merciless strike broke Julius' elegant profile. The blow took his consciousness and sent his body flying across the room, where it followed the laws of inertia and crashed, rolled, then finally remained still, body splayed across like a broken doll right beside Anastasia. Like master, like servant, the unconscious duo were lined up. It was the beastly man's misplaced sense of consideration. Man, well, next ups. Snapping his neck like he just finished warming up, the man turned to them. In truth, it was a warm-up to him. In only a few tens of seconds, Julius had dashed across the battlefield, got beaten in a one-sided fight. Anastasia tried to help, but the two ended up only collapsing together within that time. Subaru had not a single chance to cut in, and could only stand and watch. And just like him, there stood still Emilia, Ice Brand Arts, Icicle Line. Man. Absolutely none. As if to prove it, white particles danced around her. Pale blue specks of light, barely noticeable in that they were actually fragments of ice birthed by Emilia's absolute magic. Hyasetsu Kekai 1, Icicle Line. Emilia, I want to ask one thing before we start. Mixing her own magic energy with the mana of her surroundings, she put up a kind of barrier with the man in the center as he scratched the place above his eye patch, then called out to him. Man on? Lemme here, Frizzlin. Emilia, I'm Emilia. Just Emilia. Wasn't the condition to make you take just one step? You ran around a lot just now though. After giving her name, she asked a natural question. Before the fight started, the stick swinger had indeed stated that while laughing. Let's see you get me to move even one step. If that were to be taken as the condition, then it had obviously been broken. To say they had been flying across and all over the room during Julius' fight, would be grossly understating everything. However, the man shrugged and spoke, oi oi. Man, don't be talking that stuff seriously, you. Just made it up on the spot. It happens, right? You wanna be looking cool from time to time, right? It's that stuff. Get it? You don't? Well, you bein' a woman and all. Bein' a frizzlin' one and all. Be with me tonight, you. Emilia, I'm sorry, but I don't understand what you mean. Besides, I don't think I can win, even if I fight you. Subaru, Emilia. With magic ready at hand, her posture saying she was completely ready to fight, Emilia boldly proclaimed her powerlessness. The stick swinger's eyes widened at that remark, and Subaru, who was standing stiff, blurted out something. Emilia responded to him with a small, really sorry, then turned back to the man. Emilia, you're really strong. I can see that. But we have to pass this trial. So please, give us a way to win. Man. Emilia, if we manage to make you move even one step, it's our win. Let's base our match on that. Can't we? She lowered her brows, then asked the silent man. At the end, she added something with a little bit more confidence, which stunned Subaru. It was an absolutely ridiculous proposition, one only the greatest of idiots would accept. The stick swinger had remained silent for a good moment after hearing that flimsy proposal, but then. Man, ka. He bared his teeth in laughter, then looked at Emilia through his bright, blue eyes. Those eyes washed over her frame, as if licking her from head to toe, and then. Man, real fine stuff you made of, can't say I hate it, you. Showed lots of guts, saying all that to someone like me. Biggest idiot I've seen since Trisha, you. I've taken a liking to ya. Emilia, so, I've passed the trial? Man, I ain't gonna treat you that much, you. But alright. Already showed off in front of a nice lady. Gotta keep it up. Gonna turn even in my grave if I step down here. I'll make it like you want. Emilia, I'll pass if. Man, you win if you can make me move even a single step. The stick swinger with a softened expression, called out to the crestfallen Emilia, who immediately looked up and nodded, then turned to Subaru. Emilia, I'm leaving Anastasia and Julius to you. Please tend to them. Subaru, tea time. You saw what happened just now, right? Going in without a plans. Emilia, it's okay. He doesn't seem like he's aiming to kill. And I'll give my everything too. Brimming with confidence, Emilia cut off Subaru's attempt to stop her, and took a step forward. And then, while still wearing her dignified look, raised both her hands towards the stick swinger. With that much distance put between them, she could one-sidedly snipe him with her magic. Man, with a face that frizzlin', you're pretty stubborn, you. Emilia, do what you can the best you can, is what I've learned from my great knight. Even in such a disadvantageous situation, the man simply folded his giant arms and laughed fiercely. With her sights set on the man's smile, Emilia put some force into her words. Right away the air popped and snapped and droplets of pale light fluttered about, then formed into weapons of ice one after another. Swords, lances, spears, axes, arrows, and many, many more weapons formed. Ice Brand Arts, Icicle Line, a technique that used the giant reserves of magical energy inside Emilia to create a limited area boundary of destruction. a special technique forged through Subaru's otherworldly inventiveness, had activated. Amelia, yeah. She raised her voice in a war cry, but it had no effect on the man. Accompanying her cry, the weapons that had their tips pointed towards the stick swinger shot off from all directions at the same time. Point 2. Multiple weapons that struck even from one's blind spots. It was indeed an unblockable attack. Faced with this, the man once again took one chopstick in each hand and released a raging flurry of strikes, starting the tyranny of chopsticks. Art unfolded in the spectacle of a single man ripping through ice. Subaru. Following Amelia's instructions, Subaru dashed to where lay Julius and Anastasia, checked their condition and sighed in relief when he realized they were only unconscious. Anastasia's case was, as Echidna had worried, likely to be the result of her forcibly using magic by shaving off her life force. While not completely in the clear, her nosebleed had stopped, and she seemed to have simply fainted. As for Julius, even though he had been assaulted by Chopstick Fu, which had likely hurt, but retained no more than a few bruises to his body. If he were to, say, have been struck 100 times, if it were a sword and not chopsticks, he would have died 100 times over, but he was likely shown consideration, so the end result was by no means a minus. Beatrice, both of them are doing well, I suppose. But Subaru, I know. Beatrice, who had come beside Subaru to check on their well-being as well, was cut off. They were done checking the duo's condition. As for the beast that did this in the first place, Amelia was busy clashing with it head-on. Man, ka. Ice sprayed and shattered, and the overjoyed man crushed their fragments under his teeth while swinging his chopsticks. The shattered weapons of ice turned into bubbles of pale light, which fell and scattered around the raging wild man, a fantastical spectacle that repeated itself endlessly. However, even while doing so, Subaru, he won't budge. Man, started with flash in my cool side, so let me keep being my coolest till the very end. How boring can you get, you? Upon hearing Subaru's groan, the stick swinger began humming some kind of tune while intercepting the many ice weapons. Even then, while his upper body swung like he was doing some kind of tempestuous dance, his feet remained cemented in the ground, like a pair of immovable mountains. Against someone like that, even firing off magic like a hailstorm was doing little. That sense of frustration not only festered in Subaru, who had a bird's-eye view of the fight, but also in Amelia, who was directly involved in it. So, to break this stalemate, Amelia stepped in. Amelia, yeah. Silver hair fluttering in the air behind her slender body, Amelia pounced into battle. Raising both her arms, she grasped the hilt of a great battle axe. She turned herself full circle and brought it down straight towards the man's head. Man, kaka. The man casually thrust up his chopsticks to intercept its trajectory. The chopstick only slightly changed the falling battle axe's trajectory, but it grew in size as it fell, the edge finally managing to gaze past his Kinagashi S3 sleeve, and pierced into the ground. The violent blow raised a blast of wind, and unable to withstand the shock of its own power, the battle axe of ice shattered into millions of fragments. However, she let go of the handle and immediately took in hand a lance that was being launched from behind her, then turned her body a full circle turn to land her next attack. Amelia, ei. Yeah. Toria. Uria. Urioria. Yuya. The thrust of a lance, the flash of twin swords, the swing of a longsword, the slash of a katana, the smash of a hatchet, all and any forms of attacking, were all meaningless when pit against this man. Of course, Amelia was not lacking in any skill. Her physical strength was in no way lacking, and the ice brand arts was, as Subaru would usually say even though he came up with it, the one and only one technique that brought out the best of her abilities, utilizing both her physical prowess and enormous magical reserve to the greatest effect. Beatrice, Subaru. Beatrice gripped his hand tightly. This grip filled Subaru with much-needed composure, but he continued to desperately strain his eyes at the battlefield. He could not find a single chance to break into the fight. Amelia was fighting up to that extent, where she kept swapping between weapons she was good with, always playing to her strengths, continuing her physical attacks, as well as firing off her storm of magic. The center was indeed a point which was being consistently carpet-bombed. And the man who stood at the dead center of that, dealing with everything without taking even a step, the monster who'd named himself as nothing more than a mere stick swinger, was a complete abnormality. If he carelessly dove in, Subaru may only prove to be a distraction to Amelia. He could not deny that. He could do nothing to remove his anxiety. Beatrice, who held his hand, too stood in silence, fully understanding that she was the same, in being able to do nothing but watch over the battle with clenched teeth. Could the situation improve before Amelia's stamina ran out? Just then, an unexpected change occurred in this situation. That too, suddenly. Amelia, huff. Ei. Teria. Both her hands grasped a pair of swords and swung them from both sides, aimed at his neck to decapitate. The man quickly lowered his head to avoid the blow, while both swords slipped out of Amelia's hand and flew away. But Amelia immediately created another pair in her palms and swung her crossed arms outwards. The man dodged in a much fancier style, leaning so much that his body went parallel to the floor. Man ka. Amelia, wa dash. Knees bent, body almost touching the floor, the man held this position with the inhuman strength of his ankles. On the other hand, Amelia lost to her own momentum, letting her arms fly through nothing, leaving herself wide open and with a step in front, leaning back. This was the first big, even life-threatening, mistake Amelia had made in this fight. The man might have seen even more, but this moment must have been the biggest chance he had seen. Right then, the man straightened his bent knees, popping back into position. Amelia was left off guard and bit her molars. In that moment, the man bared his teeth the most he had, then leaned forward with his shark-like smile. Man, you're wide open. Using the chopsticks at hand, he brushed over Amelia's twin peaks in a scooping motion. Amelia, W.H. Amelia was dressed in her usual white outfit, where parts of her white and smooth skin were visible. The chopstick streaked over her chest, making her abundant swelling jump about obscenely, which made the man's vile smile deepen. The man groaned in satisfaction at the results of his obscene act. Man, good, real good stuff. But don't be getting mad over something so small. Amelia, Toria. Man, Goa. Her hands crossed together above head, encased in gloves fashioned from ice, came down on the man's head, who was busy ogling her with a vile smile. The blow landed so hard that the ice shattered, the sound of its hard impact resonating. The man yelled in pain, then dropped to the floor with his head held, and began rolling around. Man, go. It hurts, damn it. WH, what the hell were you thinking, you? Usually, a woman's gonna hesitate if someone does that, but you didn't even blink. Hell's with you. Amelia, But you just touched my body, right? Plus, you were completely off guard. Man, don't fuck around. The hell's with your upbringing? The hell were your parents doing? Rubbing his beaten head, the stick swinger sat on the ground with his legs crossed, shouting out his complaints. Amelia blinked in surprise at his shout, then touched the part of her chest where the chopsticks had brushed past. Amelia, did I say something strange? Man, why? Do something about this frizzlin' beauty. Get her walking out or something. Small fry. You're supposed to be attending to her. Make something of yourself, do it proper. It hurts, goddammit. Subaru, I am in no place to be taking this from you. That aside. Man, on. Despite being overwhelmed, Subaru somewhat managed to talk back to the raging man. Once he managed to swallow his own anger at how the man stretched out an obscene hand towards Amelia, he pointed to him and spoke. Subaru, to hell with just one step, you moved a whole lot away. Man. Amelia, it's true. I did it. I won. His mouth shut when Subaru pointed it out, and in exchange, Amelia started jumping up and down. And in accordance to her feelings, flowers of ice began blooming in her immediate surroundings, as if to celebrate her own victory. The man had declared it himself, the condition was to make him move even a step from where he stood, which had been achieved. That fact was as clear as day to everyone, and unless the man made things harder, it would be accepted. Subaru, well, how about it? He felt bad for Amelia, who was celebrating her own victory over the trial, but Subaru did not fully trust the man. From all the exchanges they had, to expect sportsmanship from him was difficult. To invalidate his loss, declare the last trial as void, and rush them with everything he had, would not be too unlikely. A single drop of sweat rolled down Subaru's brows and across his cheeks. Man, no help in it. My word's my word. This kinda defeat'd make me a Logan stock, let your soul be damned, but I ain't got a choice. Subaru, why you'll approve? Man, the hell you thinking of me? If I ain't keepin' my word all of my pa's and cool's gonna get shot, you. Gonna flip everything I worked on over, you. Ain't gonna be able to take a step towards women no more, you see. Subaru, with the way you lost right now, your worth was already at rock bottom. Man, shut it, small fry. Heck, you ain't even a proper fish, you're just a tadpole. Don't be throwin' round weight, tadpole. Anyway, that frizzlin' beauty over there wins. You get a pass. That's the condition. No help in it. Scratching his head violently, the stick swinger admitted his defeat. While it had spiraled into a situation where it was hard to tell whether those actions were sportsmanlike or unbecoming, Subaru had no intention of prying further into those matters, not when the announcement had already been made. Although both Julius and Anastasia lay fallen as victims of battle against the man, they would likely bounce right back up if left to recover in the green room. Despite being the 2-1D trial, it seemed to be too small an obstacle, but... Man, well, who's gonna be next? The tadpole? Or is it gonna be one of them brats? Subaru? They could advance upward. Subaru, who had been caught by that thought, became guarded once more at the man's words. The man slowly stood back up at that response, left shoulder covered by cloth. He bared it as well to match his right shoulder and turned to them. The air flooded with a burnt stench. It surged from the man's unimaginable sword spirit. A dramatic change that made everything from before seem like child's play. Subaru noticed too late. Man, there's round 7 people in this tower. Your girl's the only one to get past. Subaru. Man, well, who's up to get past me next? Tell me, you. Trial of the second floor Electra of the Great Library Pleiades. Time limit condition, unlimited. Number of challenge attempts condition, unlimited. Challengers condition, unlimited. Has cleared, Emilia. Yet to clear, Subaru, Beatrice, Julius, Anastasia, Melee, Ram. The trial continues. End of chapters 25 and 26, The Man Who Waits on the Second Floor, Electra.